If you want to get creative with a drone, you have to probably be closer to a subject, especially because I like to have people in my shot. And if you go too far up, you don't really see what that shape is. I've shot like portraits. I would shoot people from above where you would recognize their face and the expression on their face as well. And of course, for that, you need to be a little bit closer to them. I really like that different perspective, which allows me to be creative on the ground with some kind of props or with the person I'm actually taking a picture of.
Hey, welcome to episode 396 of the Beginner Photography Podcast, brought to you by CloudSpot, the easiest way to deliver and even sell your photos online. I'm your host, Raymond Hatfield, and today we are chatting with drone photographer Alina Rudya about how to capture the world from above. Now, I've had two drones now. The first one I crashed horribly, but this new one, I bought it because drone photography seems like so much fun. And then I get out and realize, wow, it's actually pretty difficult. So I mostly just use it for, just drone stuff, but not much photography, even though I would like to do more intentional drone photography. So this week's guest, Alina Rudya, on top of drone photography, she also shoots portraits. And one thing that drew me to her work is that she uses her drone in portrait sessions as well. She captures portraits with her drone. And it's more than just like tiny person, big world type photo that we're all used to seeing. But we can see our subject's face. We can see their expression. And she's using her drone in a way that most do not. And it's that outside of the box thinking that, just always gets me so excited. Alina also has a course on learning how to use your drone for photography, more specifically doing her signature kind of top-down portraits. And you can find her course on Domestika. It's very reasonably priced, and I'm also going to link to the course in the show notes as well if you are interested in checking that out. I really think that you're going to love this one. There's just so much more than just like the technicals. Like if you don't have a drone, I still think that you're going to learn a lot in terms of composition and what goes into a photo that makes it more interesting than just being a unique perspective. So like I said, let's go ahead and get on into this interview with Alina Rudya. When did you know that photography was going to play an important role in your life?
I wanted to be a photographer since I was probably 9 years old. I've told this story to people over and over again, I guess, but I'm going to tell you now again. So I lived in Ukraine back at the time. My father, who was a nuclear physicist, he was traveling the world for different conferences. He went to the US and he brought the National Geographic magazine back with him. And I saw the pictures in the magazine and I saw the stories and I was really fascinated. I was like, oh my God, this is what people do. They actually travel the world and like tell the stories with their pictures. And since my father was also an amateur photographer, we had a lot of cameras lying around around our house. And I really, really wanted to do this. But at that time, I really didn't know how because there was not really a school in Kiev where I grew up, and it was not really a profession you would like earn money with. And I guess for a really long time, like I didn't think that it was really a possibility. So when I was a child, I really wanted to do this, but I didn't know that I would be able to make money with it at all, or actually make it my profession. So I've studied something else before, but I think, around 9, that was the time where I was like, okay, I want to take camera and take pictures.
So saying that you want to take a camera and take pictures, at the time, this was film photography, right?
So I've had my first camera, as I said, like my father had different cameras which were more professional and they were all film cameras at the time. Then I've got like a first probably point and shoot camera, which maybe like at 12 or 13, lost it, then got another one. And it was not really any kind of like super artistic photos. But at the same time, we didn't have smartphones back then. And back then it was the end of 90s, beginning of 2000s. Then I got like my first digital camera. I remember there was like 5 megapixel.
So awesome
So
at the
that
time.
was,
So exciting.
that was already probably 2000, I don't know, 2004. And that's when I started like really taking pictures, but like I also had no idea how to really use Photoshop or how to work with professional light or even like how to really operate a camera in a manual mode because that digital camera didn't really have a proper manual mode
Sure.
available. But yeah, it was fun because I think like the worse the camera, the more kind of like you practice more just to get that kind of look.
Mm-hmm.
For a while it didn't work. And I think like many people would tell you now that camera doesn't matter. And for sure, for certain kind of photos, it doesn't, especially nowadays where you can actually use AI or you can use different kinds of apps to pimp up your photos to look a certain way. So they almost look like they could have been printed in a magazine without knowing so much about photography. Back
Sure.
then, you needed to know Photoshop, you needed to know good lighting, you needed to know how the camera properly works in order to get any kind of like nice outcome. So yeah, that's what I did. A lot of practice. And then the time came when I went to Germany. I actually studied photography.
Oh, really? Oh, well, okay. So before that, though, I want to know all those years playing with cameras. You said it wasn't until you were older and got into digital photography that you really started to understand manual mode. So before that, I want to know what kind of kept that interest going in your photography, because if National Geographic is what grabbed your attention as a 9, 10, 11, 12, 14-year old, no matter how hard you try, you're not taking National Geographic worthy images in that time. So what was it about photography that continued to draw you in?
I think my ADHD, undiagnosed. I didn't know that I have had ADHD. And actually, I wanted to do something artistic. Like I wanted to do either painting or some kind of like, I wanted to do art. But somehow, like I think because of my ADHD, I always tell people that I'm lazy. So like I was lazy to be patient, to draw or to paint something or to sit for hours and like study an object and then draw it and for hours and sometimes like maybe even days. And so I thought like, okay, with photography, I take a picture and then it's there and I have this instant gratification, which I know now. So for me, like photography somehow was this easy way into getting into this kind of like artsy world without actually spending too much time. But of course, in the end, I ended up spending a lot of time also studying photography. But still, I have a feeling that this interest, which kept me there, was because I wanted to do something with the art. And somehow I was not concentrated and not really focused enough to do the art, which demands a lot of time to
Of course.
produce a result.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So when it came time to learn manual mode, I guess my first question is why? What prompted you to decide to learn manual mode? What were you not happy about with your images all those years before that made you want to learn? Yeah, we'll just start there. What was it about your images that you weren't happy with that caused you to dive into manual mode?
Manual mode. I don't think that I thought in that kind of way, like, oh, I have to start using manual mode. It's just that, of course, I realized I need a more professional camera and also better lenses in order to get a certain type of images. And also, I understood that in order to work with magazines or with clients, I need to have proper equipment as well as learn how to work with light and how to actually get the exact image I portray in my head through like the means of photography.
Hmm.
And that's why I realized, okay, I need to study photography. And the opportunities were already back then. Like I could have already started like some YouTube tutorials. But at the same time, again, because I have ADHD, it's very hard for me to do something without some kind of pressure. So I needed to go to school because if I go to school, then like I would need to put in time because that would be the demand in order to like graduate. And also like because I didn't really know where to start. And like I went on to Germany on a scholarship in a liberal arts school here. I also wanted to travel abroad. And like as a Ukrainian back in the day, I couldn't go anywhere without a visa. And a student visa was actually a really great option. So I came to Berlin and then I met people who were studying in a photography school here. And they told me like, well, it's almost free. In Germany, education is almost free. So you don't pay anything or a very little amount of money per semester. And you have to get an exam to get in. And then you can study photography in one of those like really cool schools. So that's what I did. And yeah, I got in. And then there was also a struggle with the visa again because they didn't want to give me a visa to study photography.
Oh.
for a while. Yeah, but it's a long story because,
Sure.
yeah.
This
But
is obviously the photography focused podcast, which I understand. You don't have to go into all that. So, when you decided to go to school, when you enrolled in school, was the goal for you at that time simply to have something cool to study while traveling? Or did you think this is going to be my way to start a business and earn a living with my camera?
I have to admit that I never am motivated. I don't really do strategic thinking like that, unfortunately, probably. Uh, Again, ADHD, and it's unfortunate sometimes, but I more were like, okay, I will start doing this. And then if it works out, then obviously I can work in this field. And of course, I already had two master degrees before I started studying photography, just because I felt like, okay, if it's gonna be like what I'm not wasting my time because I'm studying. So while I'm studying, if this really is what I really like destined to do, then something will come up. And it did come up and it worked out and it's still working out. So I made the right choice.
You made the right choice, yeah. You talked about obviously when you went to school, you're learning on a dedicated camera, right? Today, you still shoot with a dedicated camera, still shoot Sony, I believe, is that right?
No, I shoot with Nikon. I tried different cameras, but Sony was never one of
I
them.
see. Okay. But today, the way that I found you is through your education in drone photography, right? You
Yeah.
do today have a level of that National Geographic aspect where you take travel photography.
Well, tell this to National Geographic.
I will, if I had an in at National Geographic, I would absolutely do that for you. But one of the big things, like I said, that you teach on is drone photography. And drone photography is an area where so many are interested in it because it's new, it's exciting, it offers such a unique perspective on the world. But there's not a lot of education on it. And not a lot of the traditional photography education applies to drone photography. So I wanted to talk more about that. I guess the first question is, how did you get into drone photography and what was it that drew you to it to use alongside of a dedicated camera?
Well, for a while, I was lucky to be like a travel influencer slash photographer where I was invited by tourism boards of different countries to like travel and do shoots and do campaigns for different also like hotels and different companies, big brands. And I was very often accompanied by other people, also like influencers or photographers, videographers, and many of them were men. Because somehow if the adventure or travel area, especially when it comes to adventure and landscape photography, it's so overwhelmingly,
Male
I
dominated.
think, male dominated. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so everybody, like boys with their toys, kind of like running around with their drones. And I was like, okay, well, I would love to have one actually, because I would actually want to experiment with it. And first, like in the beginning, I felt like I can't really do any kind of artistic or interesting pictures because I felt like, okay, it's not, I can't really change so much. I mean, the drone is flying and there's not that much that I can do. Like now, I think that the newer drones, you can change basically everything. You can turn it around, you can change the f-stop and everything. But like, I didn't even know anything about the DJI drones, which I'm using now in the beginning. So I was like, this is not really artistic. This is not real photography. This is just basically something you would do maybe just to for a wow effect, but it's not really artistic. But then when I had those images, I really like the top down shots and I like the geometry of it. And I actually shot people from above standing on a ladder or on a balcony. And I was like, well, if I had a drone and I could fly higher, I could also use and shoot people in the landscapes from a much higher vantage point. And actually, I could somehow artistically direct the shot. And that's when I started, like, I actually got the first little drone, like a DJI. I don't even remember the name of it, but it was one of the small ones, which only flew for like 10 minutes and then the battery would go out. But I managed actually to do some of my first pictures were some of my best, which were then published in books and on covers of magazines, which was actually amazing because if you think about it, it was just like a little tiny drone, which didn't really even hold that much in the air, but somehow I still managed to do the pictures, which I was really proud of afterwards.
clearly you want more women to get into drone photography. So if you're speaking to a woman right now who shoots with a camera but wants to get into drone
Hmm.
photography, maybe they're hesitant, what would you say to them?
I would just say, just go for it. No, I just think that like women, just female creators, they shouldn't be discouraged by anyone that they shouldn't be doing something, or just because they don't see enough women with their drones and or something. I know a lot of women who drone and who actually are amazing and who make that their profession and they're making money with it. And it's a very nice niche as well, because still not that many people are in it in comparison to like traditional photography. So if this is something you want to try, I encourage you, just be careful and abide the rules.
I want to know more about that, the visualization element of it, because when it comes to drone photography, there's this novelty to it, like you said, that once you see it, you take notice just because of the unique perspective.
Mm-hmm.
For those getting into drone photography, once they get past that aspect of, oh, now I can take photos from higher, how do we start creating images, or how do you start creating images that have substance and are not just simply a unique perspective?
Well, the thing is that, as I've said before, the only like really artistic way I could imagine working with drones, you can only create so much, because it's still a very like you usually use it for landscapes or maybe some urban photos, or probably for a top-down shot where
Mm-hmm.
you involve people and maybe some kind of props. But you can't really do as much because the drone usually flies up high, and from there you don't see that much in the bottom. So either you create a very elaborate set, which would for one picture, or yeah, you incorporate people and you somehow put them into the landscape and you use kind of some colorful props in order to create certain shapes. And then, you see the perspective, you see a new kind of, from that kind of top down view, from the bird view, you can see the world a little bit differently. And of course, you can use your imagination in order to create some kind of storyline, but it's still kind of limited because it's just like with the smartphone photography, you have certain limitation when it comes to quality, but also to the subjects you can photograph without losing quality. The same as with a drone. Like you're not going to take real like sophisticated portraits with a drone. You can photograph people, but you would not take close-up pictures with a drone. I mean, it's still possible, of course, but I think it would be probably more in a video if you would use a bigger Inspire ones, which I've never used before. But still, like I have a feeling that for most people who are getting into drone photography, they should really understand what are they going to use it for. So it's going to probably be landscapes. It's probably going to be more urban things, and then some kind of abstract things and top-down shots. And the creativity comes, but probably mostly in top-down shots, because this is where you can use the body, human body, as a kind of like shape, or like as a throwing shadows. I'm now getting lost in it a little bit. But I just want to say that, yeah, like there's certain creativity to drone photography, but I think it is still rather limited, or at least like the way for a normal user, for a person who is not like a professional who has
Mm-hmm.
also big budgets. So if somebody's getting into drone photography, as I see most people, even those who are taking my course, they still tend to just do pictures of landscapes because it's the easiest one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And also like having a drone and using a drone in most countries nowadays is also connected to a certain, of course, responsibility. And for in many countries like Germany, in order to operate a drone of a certain weight and to fly it up high or far away, you need to have a pilot license. And I think a lot of people who even want to do it, they either do it illegally in a way, they don't obtain a license. Like I think most Instagram influencers, I'd know they would not have a license.
Right.
Not pushing anyone under the bus there, but I mean, I got my license, just the first one, but the second one, it's really like if you want to do it business wise, in most cases, in most countries, then you need a license. And I think for most enthusiasts, they wouldn't really do it.
Sure.
Like it
Sure.
would be too much of an effort. It's a lot of money as well, in investment in a toy if you're not really using it. as a part of a job, then it is just an expensive toy
A
for
very
most
fun,
people.
expensive toy.
Yeah, but also like quite dangerous one we
Of
have to
course,
talk
of
about
course.
too.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of people who are crashing their drones and it's all fun and giggles if it doesn't hurt anyone, but it can, especially like illegally flying drones in the cities where people are living, and you never know ever what's going to happen because it's still a machine in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And I had issues with my old drone where I just lost contact with it. And it was scary because I was like, well, first of all, I don't want to lose a drone. And second, like, what if it just falls down onto someone?
Yeah.
And you don't want to have it. So you need to understand this is not just an average camera. This is why you have to do the pilot course, because you're operating a flying object.
There is a lot of irresponsibility in the world of drone photographers, especially when you're getting into it, because it is that unique perspective. You know, you don't have to have anything to buy one. You don't have to prove anything to buy one. It's like, so you get it, and then anyway, it can happen. And we don't want to cause any damage. So anybody listening to this, follow whatever rules and guidelines are imposed by your local government. But I want to talk more about the image creation process, because your top-down photos, I love them. When I look at them, there's a lot of photographers who do top-down photos, obviously with drones, but there's something more immersive about your top-down photos. And I can't necessarily put my finger on it. I feel like it's possibly distance from the subject. I feel like you're probably closer than most people, that most people take the approach of, well, I got a drone, I can send it up to 400 feet, let's send it up to 400 feet and see what we can get. But your images are much closer. Is that intentional? Is that immersion factor something that you strive for, or is it just naturally occurring in the way that you were shooting before you got a drone?
Well, I think it's connected to the two factors. First factor, when I got my first drone, I couldn't really fly far and I couldn't really fly too much up because it was like a little drone, which didn't lost connection as far as it was like exceeding 100 meters or 300 feet. But at the same time, as I said, if you want to get creative with a drone, you have to probably be closer to a subject, especially because I like to have people in my shots. Sometimes it's self-portrait, sometimes it's other people, sometimes it's some kind of object with great shape. And if you go too far up, you don't really see what that shape is. This is why I really like the change of perspective in my top-down shots, and generally like the top-down to see something from above. But I really also like to see the detail. I like to see, as I've shot like portraits, but not portraits in this traditional sense, but like I would shoot people from above where you would recognize their face and the expression on their face as well. And of course, for that, you need to be a little bit closer to them. I really like that kind of different perspective, but still, which allows me to be creative on the ground with some kind of props or with the person I'm actually taking a picture of.
How much planning goes into your drone images? Because when I look at them, they look well composed. They look like you're in a aesthetically pleasing location. You have somebody who obviously knows how to interact with a camera. Is there a lot of work that goes into setting up a shot, or do they happen more organically than that?
Most cases, it's really more organic. I'm not a good planner, as I've said and mentioned before. But at the same time, I have a good, like after working years and years in photography, and I know the good light. I really never underestimate the power of color contrast. And so, of course, like if I see a place, I kind of already visualize it from above. And I was like, well, that might be an interesting shot. So if I would put a person there, and I have associative thinking, like imagination, so I can already kind of like, oh, that would be cool if this person would wear this kind of clothes and it will contrast with the backdrop, for example. So it happens most of the time. Occasionally, for my course, Domestica course, we had to plan the shots. So I had to plan the model, the location, the clothing she would be wearing. So that was more planned. But in most cases, like, yeah, I don't really, especially when I was traveling before quite a lot for my work, I would just fly in a place if I thought that it would be amazing to shoot there. But I would not plan. Sometimes I just see a place and I'll be, this will be great. Like recently, I was at my husband's parents' place, and they live in this beautiful place in rural Czech Republic. And during the evening, we were sitting at the terrace, and then we saw that there were like reindeers in the field. And I was actually flying the drone just before that, and I saw them from the drone. And then I saw that they're like in the field nearby. So I was like, well, this is gonna be a really cool shot because I've never like seen reindeers before. So I would just fly a little bit and like follow them a little bit and took some pictures as well as like some videos of them. They're really cute. And that was a spontaneous shot, which actually turned out really nice. It was a little bit dark already, but it was still like something which happened spontaneously because you can never really plan to see a deer.
Sure.
But that happened.
What about not timing, but you mentioned that you have this eye. You've been shooting photography for a long time, that when you see something in front of you, in your brain, you can kind of think, this lens would look great here, maybe this setting, this type of
Hmm.
photo, maybe a silhouette, whatever it is, would look good in this situation. But how do you know what the world looks like from above that it's interesting enough to take the time and the effort to send up the drone to create a shot?
Well, I think with the urban environment, you generally kind of understand that it's going to be like somehow geometric, especially like already from the ground, you can kind of imagine. Also, like in many cases, you can also look at the Google map. And if you look at the Google map, you can see what it looks from above. And you're like, okay, the Google map is, of course, from the space. So it's a little bit like zoomed out even more. But at the same time, you're like, okay, I can actually maybe fly a little bit like over this particular pond or look at this bridge and actually this colorful course. And yeah, you can always like double check in Google Maps if you have those. But generally, as I said, like with the just, I see color and I know that color from above would look even better because it would be just like this mass block from above. It will look different than from the ground. And I think it's just a training. It's like generally with photography, after a while, you kind of like know what will look good. You saw this before, or you saw something similar before. So when you approach a certain, like, repetition of columns, you're like, well, this is going to look good because there's a repetition. It looks geometric. There's symmetry in it, and it'll probably look also cool from above. Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you fly up and you're like, oh, wow, what's this thing? But at the same time, yeah, colors, repetition, geometry, symmetry, all these things, they're always great for photography. And these are things which can be seen very well with drone because you can actually see the perspective, you can actually see the scale. And the easiest way would be probably like if you fly over a huge parking lot in, I don't know, some Walmart, that would be probably really cool from above because there will be a lot of cars, and from the ground, there will be just random cars standing all over the place. But if you like look from above, there will be obviously some lines, some grid lines where they parked, and there will be cars of different colors. And probably if you're in a flat light, that would be pretty cool because there will be no extra shadows. It will just look like little toy cars. So yeah, I mean, if you're already kind of used to this kind of thinking, like knowing what's going to look like, then you're probably just not even looking at Google Maps anymore.
I see. That's one of those things that was going to be my follow up question, which is I'm sure that there's times where you just go out and think to yourself, let me just fly, let me just throw up the drone and see what it looks like here. And then you start creating from there. It's not everything is set up because of Google Maps. Is that right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if
Mhm.
you're traveling to certain places, like if you go to Iceland, if you're flying somewhere like in the Philippines and Namibia, majestic places where like a lot of also like where you can see like when like I need to see the scale from above, it's going to be probably beautiful. So like whenever I was traveling or am traveling now, like I know that it's going to look good at certain places. And sometimes like if I want to shoot something, for example, I have a shoot this Friday and I want to go to the lake, and I actually want to use my drone this time intentionally to shoot a certain picture. I'm not going to tell you what it's going to be because it's secret, but I want to do it. And this time I have to plan. But I kind of like already did those shots before. So I was like, well, I think in this particular place, I'm going to find a location, like this particular spot where this thing might look really, really good. So I'm going to try it out this weekend.
So
Friday.
that's an example of just experience. You've done something similar before, you saw the result, and now you want to tweak it to make it more closely aligned to your vision.
Exactly. I mean, it's like, if you're portrait photography and you're specializing in portrait photography, or you're like, for example, you're wedding photographers. So, already, like, of course, you can always experiment and do the tricks, but there are definitely certain shots which work each time. So whenever there's like golden hour, you're like, stand there, like kiss the bride, throw it away. Don't think about how stupid it looks now. It's gonna be amazing. And you're like photo album. So I mean, I don't know if you're like that.
That's
I'm like
exactly what I say. Yep, every time. Mm-hmm.
yeah, so probably, that we all have like a few tricks up our sleeve, and
Mm-hmm.
we also know what looks good. And we know the limitations and the possibilities of our cameras, and whether it's a camera, a phone, or a drone.
Yeah. How important is time of day? Is it as important as when you're just shooting with a dedicated camera, or is the relationship between light and the angle of the drone make things different?
Well, actually, definitely light is very important because it also depends on what you're shooting and what kind of effect you want to have. So with the top-down shots, I think actually either the light, which is actually usually really bad for portrait photography, for like you would not want to shoot things at midday because you are standing on the ground and something is throwing a shadow. Or actually, like, yeah, that would be like, but if you're shooting from above, then probably midday light when the sun is actually lighting everything evenly would be a perfect shot because everything will be evenly lit from above. Or for example, if you have flat light, usually like flat light is great if you're shooting objects with repetition, for example, those kind of cars on parking lot. If there are many of them and there's no shadows, you would only have the color contrast, and probably it's going to be more fun than if it would be like actually harsh black shadow from the car, and it will distract from the image. At the same time, when you have like in the evening, you're shooting again, like you're shooting probably, first of all, golden hour. It's going to be beautiful. You're shooting the mountains. You can do landscapes in golden hour, much more beautiful than what you would do during like a flat, boring day. But at the same time, also you can play with the shadows, with the long shadows of people. Recently, I saw this beautiful video of two people playing, like basically was just their shadows moving. Like they were moving, but you wouldn't see them, but their shadows were moving with them. So you would actually see the shape of the shadow, which was amazing. And of course, in order to get that kind of image, you need a particular light. So it all depends on your creative idea, and it all depends on a particular shot and on a particular, just like in normal photography, basically, in a particular effect you want to reach. And we all know that, of course, if you want to do landscape, it's probably better to fly at sunrise or sunset because then the sky would be probably the best. Or
Right.
like some dramatic time, like maybe like rain, or rain is bad for drones, but some people still do it.
How do you balance that? Because if midday is not good for shooting portraits with a traditional camera, but it's good for drone photography, how do you balance using both, where one benefits from a particular type of light and the other one does not?
I mean, golden hour is definitely good for both, but at the same time, if sometimes I fly drone, like I wouldn't probably take pictures with my normal camera, or I would, but I would just look for an open shade.
Hmm.
So it all depends on what I'm doing, actually. I definitely think, like, for example, this Friday, I'm going to shoot with both my camera and my drone. So I'll see how it will going to work. But we're still going to a place at golden hour. I hope it will be like, now it's very sunny, but the next days, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's Berlin. It's like, it's summer. Summer is beautiful here, but you never count on the weather here,
Oh man,
unfortunately, as well. Yeah,
I
but
get it.
the past days were amazing.
It's similar here in Indiana. Yesterday, when I woke up, it was 83 degrees Fahrenheit, which wasn't terrible, and it was sunny.
Let me check it out. How much is that? I think it's not very hot.
No, it's warm, but within an hour, we were under such a severe thunderstorm warning that I've literally never seen the sky blacker in my life. Horrible hail, horrible lightning. And an hour later, it was a beautiful day again. And yet it wasn't on like any radar or anything. You had no idea. Like I couldn't imagine being out on accident for something like that. So if you show up on Saturday and the weather does not go the way that you wanted it to, now do you focus all of your attention on using your Nikon to capture what it is that you wanted and say, we'll do the drone stuff some other time? Or do you scrap the whole thing and start over?
Well, actually, the bad weather, or if it's going to be flat light, it's going to be better for a drone, actually, but then for the normal pictures. So I hope the weather will be fine so we can do both. But yeah, I'm not very good when my plans go all
South.
wrong. Like I'll
Yeah.
probably be very frustrated and like throw a few things around. Like, I don't know.
Rocks. Yeah, all those sorts of things.
Sorry, I'm like super hot because it's ridiculously hot, and Germans don't believe in air conditioning. So
Well, it exists. I've seen it. We have one. It does exist. Did you happen to look up what 83 is in Celsius, just in case there's anybody in Australia?
Oh, it's 28 degrees. So it's probably the same here. It was actually much warmer, but I also live like under the roof in a rooftop apartment. You can see the beams, the wooden beams over there.
Oh, yeah. So then I appreciate you finding that information. As we come to the end of our time here, I want to wrap up with something actionable that listeners
Sure.
can take.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say somebody bought their first drone and they want
Mm-hmm.
to go out and they've been taking photos, but it's not what it is that they were hoping to achieve. It's not the photos that they see on your profile, right? That it is that you're sharing. So what are, I don't know, the first three things that you would encourage them to consider or do to start taking better photos with their drone?
Well, first of all, I really think that you should just learn how the drone works and maybe don't fly away too far before you really know how to come back and how to land it. Secondly, if you want to do top-down shots, make sure that you're like above the object and that the camera is actually the axle is like really like pointing down. Because a lot of people, like I notice sometimes people are taking a picture and it's like a little bit skewed and you can see that like it's not really symmetric. But generally, this is all like technical stuff. Like I think people will learn after a while. I think the rule number one, if you have shots which you really, really like, I think there's no shame in order to look at the shot and be like, how can I copy this? Because if you realize how that shot was taken, if you're like, okay, this person, like, why do I look funny and this person actually looks good? Oh, maybe it's the shape of the body. So in order to take this like selfie from above, I have to change the shape of my body. Or for example, if you look and it's like, okay, why does this landscape look good? And I went to the same space in like, I don't know, South Tyrol in Italy, and my shot doesn't look the same. And you're like, oh, maybe it was like a different type of a day. And there's a huge shadow in my shot and there's no shadow in this one. So I should probably come tomorrow morning and try again. So I think copying and trying to understand how like professionals and people whose photos you admire took their pictures is like a very good exercise for the beginners. And there's no shame in it. You're like learning. You want to know if you're not like buying my course for some reason, even though it's very accessible for most people and it's in English and many other languages, including Spanish, German, and other languages. But if you're not buying my course, you can always crash few drones before you start doing good pictures. But I mean, there's always an option to copy other people and try to learn from others people's pictures before you start doing something better. And I think editing process is also like plays a role, but I think nowadays it's much easier than it was before with
I
all the
agree.
apps.
I agree. That actually leads me in here. This will be my last question for you, which is when I look at your Instagram feed, when I look at your images, you have both photos from your Nikon and from your drone. But like I was saying earlier, there's an immersion factor to your drone photography. And on your feed, at least, it is so seamless that all of your photos just kind of they work together. So if I were to just kind of like squint my eyes and like scroll, I wouldn't say, oh, that one's a drone photo, that one's from the Nikon, that one is this, that one's that. They all have a cohesive style to them. So I want to know how much of that is in the image itself and how much of that is done through editing.
Oh, I don't do much editing. I mean, I have a certain presets which I created myself, like which I kind of use on certain images. I do like this kind of like cinematic, a little bit maybe vintagey, but at the same time very color pop editing style. But I still don't change my images that much. I don't really Photoshop them. I don't really use Photoshop. I use Lightroom most of the time, and it's just a little bit like the color change, which I do
Mm-hmm.
most of my pictures. So I just usually use, I mean, as I said, like I love colors and I like shadow and light play. So probably it's present in both of my drone and in my
Dedicated
traditional
camera.
camera photography.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's probably what you see. But of course, the colors and the editing style is the same
Yeah.
because I usually like I prefer a certain look to my pictures. But if you would see them also without an editing, you would know that I like my pictures to pop. I like them colorful. So sometimes I choose, probably sometimes unintentionally, locations or clothing or props which are colorful and probably like have a nice contrast with the surrounding. So that's probably why. But thank you very much for
Of
noticing
course.
that. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. So just to clarify real quick, while you're out shooting and you're using both, is there ever a time where maybe you look at the display on your phone while you're flying your drone and think to yourself, I really like this element that I still do, like when I'm shooting through my camera, whether it be composition or how people look or the way that elements are arranged in a photo. Do you see many similarities between the two yourself?
Well, probably, yes. I mean, that's,
It's kind of not a fully formed question, so I apologize
yeah,
for that.
no, it's okay. But like, yeah, I think I see the world. It's because at the end, like having a drone is basically as if you are shooting from a very tall chair, so it's just the perspective which changes. And of course, it's also the scale which changes, but it's still photography. It's still taking a picture of objects just from a different angle and from like probably a few hundred meters above. But it's similar to taking a picture of people lying on the floor with their camera when you're standing on a stool above them. I mean, I also have those pictures, for example, which I shoot with my phone. I really love taking group pictures of people from above. And I do it also with my phone standing on a chair sometimes. And so this is why there's this unanimity between some pictures where you can see people from above, which I shot with a drone, and then another one which I shot at a party while my friends were like lying on the mattress on the floor. So yeah, there's certain similarities in those for me.
Yeah, I see. Well, you answered that question perfectly. That was a terrible question and a wonderful answer, so I appreciate that. Before I let you go, I know that listeners are thinking to themselves, wait a second, I want to see some more of these photos that we're talking about, and I want to learn more about this course as well. Can you share with us where we can see some of your work online and where we can learn drone photography?
First of all, you can visit my website. It's Alina Rudya, RUDYA.com. And then you can also visit my Instagram, which is RRRUDYA. Very creative, I know. My own surname with 3 R's. I share not only drone pictures there. Recently, I actually haven't shared that many drone pictures. I was very uninspired in winter because Berlin winter is gloom and dread and horrible. This is why I escaped to Brazil for 1 month, actually. But yeah, my Instagram is probably the best place to see new pictures coming up. And of course, you can also take my course in creative drone photography on Domestika. It's in English and also translated in many other languages, including Spanish, German, Czech, French. I don't even know, but I think there's subtitles in many, many languages. And yeah, people said it is a good course. I'm not bragging, but I've got only positive reviews so far.
If you have a drone, I'm sure that you are super excited to get out and fly it like myself. And if you don't have a drone, I'd be willing to bet that you are looking on Amazon for one right now. I have it's a DJI Mavic Mini 2, Mavic 2 Mini, Mavic Mini 2 SE. I don't know. I really don't know. But it's not the newest model. It's teeny tiny. And what's cool is that one, it fits just about anywhere. Two, it's extremely lightweight. But three, like it's still a really capable camera, or drone rather, and can still do a lot of things, especially because I'm not looking to fly it miles away. I'm not looking to go 100 miles an hour. Like I just want to kind of see a unique perspective. And it, for me, is the perfect drone for that. There's nothing else that I want out of it. So this was a really cool chat with Alina, and I really appreciate your time, Alina, if you are listening. I had 3 big takeaways from this episode. The first one was specifically about just photography and how learning to shoot in manual for her was a way of taking her photography seriously, right? When she was just out and she was capturing those point and shoot photos on film and whatnot, like you can still create photos that you're happy with, but when you really want to take photography to that next level and start taking it seriously, for Lena, learning manual was the way that she was able to do that. It is so, so powerful. Takeaway number 2 was how important color, repetition, and geometry are in, getting really unique drone photos. Those are the 3 things: color, repetition, and geometry. If you can find one of those 3 elements and you can use that in your drone work in an image, it automatically is going to stand out for being more than just that unique perspective. And for me, I thought that that really helped because I always find it like almost overwhelming. Like, wow, I have so much options here in a drone. What should I shoot? But that really, like I said, narrows it down: color, repetition, and geometry. Takeaway number 3 was learn from others, or copy their photos to learn. And I did this. I think everybody does this when you first start out in photography. That's why if you were to take a photography class or something like that, you're going to start off with a book and it's going to be full of photos, and you're going to be encouraged to try to do some assignments based on the photos that are in there. creativity can't really happen within a vacuum. We have to be exposed to something to then want to actually go out and shoot that thing. So when we're learning photography, it makes sense to look at the work of others. And if there's something that speaks to you about that image, try to copy it. There's nothing wrong with that. You're not trying to replicate their work. You're just trying to figure out the technical side of how they did it. What is it about this image that makes it stand out? Because you're very quickly going to see, oh, one, this was not as easy as I thought it was going to be. And two, the thing that I love about the original photo isn't in my photo. What am I missing? What is that thing? What is that secret element that I need to introduce into my images to get the style of work that I want to eventually get to? So again, it's not about copying it to do your own, but almost as if it's just like an exercise. And that is so incredibly important. Well, that was it for this week. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you have a takeaway, I would love to hear your thoughts in the new Beginner Photography Podcast community, which you can join for free, not on social media. It is our own private platform, free of ads, free of the noise of social media, and free of politics as well, and also all those creepy tracking bugs and whatnot. So you can come join the Beginner Photography Podcast community by heading over to beginnerphotopod.com/group. Again, that's beginnerphotopod.com/group, and we would love to see you in there. That is it for this week. Until next week, remember, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow. Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.